We rollin'! Yeah! Welcome to MMA Noise. I'm your host, Mike Straka. I'm sitting with none other than the babysitter to the stars, the world famous Burt Watson. Burt, thanks for joining us.
Oh man, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here, baby.
You're talking about the growth of MMA, and right now, back in our day, when it was coming up, Chuck Liddell was the icon. Tito Ortiz was an icon. Randy Couture was an icon. DJ Penn was an icon. Now there's two people that ring that bell consistently, and it's Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey. And how ironic that women's MMA is coming up slower, and it's Ronda, the #1 person that's making MMA more mainstream in America than anybody else. And an Irish dude.
and it's not hard to understand and to believe that, because when the UFC initially started and they started to go into female MMA and getting into women, Ronda Rousey was the first person that they brought on. So she would have absolutely been the pioneer for the growth of that sport, and she is still the pioneer for the growth of that sport. And you know, when I was in boxing, Layla Ali came along, and I did her pro debut. Layla's record, I think, is 25-0. I did 23 of her fights, and without asking and without actually going ahead and pushing forward, just like Ronda now, when you get into the sport and you perform at a high level, people pay attention to it. And so not only do the people involved in the sports, but the news media, a national exposure, honestly, there's nothing they can do right now about the speed of that train that runs in Ronda Rousey.
Also in the town of sort of CFFC, which is where you're working these days, but this is the dojo of Jonathan Gleb, of Sidichu Honor, and of course Paul Felder, who just had a great fight against Edson Barboza.
It was an amazing fight, and a testament to Paul Felder, who went into that fight at 10-0, and probably, I think, his third fight or so at that level. When you perform at that level, and you perform and you finish a fight the way he did, and I mean, it was a testament to the way he took what was considered the hardest leg strikes in the sport itself.
Right.
I mean, he withstood that, and he made it through the fight. I mean, unbelievable. You know, and there are times when you get to that level, there's a lot of things that you have to deal with that not only make you prepared for the fight, but you got to prepare for beyond that. Paul did himself justice. He did Philadelphia proud.
Everybody wants to know why you left the UFC.
Well, it's like anything. When you read a book, you can't complete a book if you go back chapters. You got to keep going, and you got to read ahead. My time with the UFC, I did 14 years with the UFC. 14 good years. 14 years that I learned, 14 years I was taught, 14 years I created certain situations that they're still continuing, and certain things that have become a staple in MMA. But yes, there was a situation at UFC 184 in LA that I was approached by a high-level executive on the UFC staff at the time, who didn't directly question what I thought basically was just why a fighter was not moved from the hotel back from the way into the hotel, which was 10 minutes apart from each other. His question was, why wasn't it handled a little better? Which, when the question was posed to me, quite frankly, I was offended by it. I was offended by the way I was approached. I was offended by the way the question was directed. I felt my integrity was questioned. I felt my work ethics was questioned. And I felt, not only that, but I had just spoken to Mark Munoz, and I don't want to mention Mark's name, because this is one of the reasons I'm sitting here speaking to you now, because when I didn't address it, names started coming out. Mark Munoz, Ronda Rousey, this camp, that camp, and it had nothing to do with anybody. It had to do with that one executive that decided he was going to step to me. And when he stepped to me, I stepped back to him, plain and simple. Do I miss anything? I miss that money, man. You know, that's a lot when you know, I miss that. I miss the fighters, you know, but now with being with the CFFC, you know, I get a chance to work with the younger guys, the up-and-coming fighters and promoters.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what you did behind the scenes with fighters themselves. Now, you're famous for one very, very loud saying, which goes something like,
It goes like, baby, you know it's time to go to work. And when it's time to go to work, don't get too far away from me. We rollin'! Yeah! All night long. Oh, yeah.
And this is why they love you, isn't it? Because you get them psyched up, you get them pumped up for that walk.
I just got myself psyched up.
That grew organically. It wasn't like something that you started out doing. It just happened because you got to know the fighters better year after year after year, and they got to count on you.
Fighters, when they get in the dressing room, they don't know when it's time for them to go. They don't know when it's time to leave, or when they're supposed to put gloves on, or when they need to be on stage, or they're on point for the next fight. They don't know that. And that message has to be delivered to them. Everything, anything you need to do, we're gonna try to make sure you know it. And last but not least, if it's up here, I want it right here, baby. I found a way to deliver that message without leaving my spot. Major celebrity decided to walk back into the dressing room area, and he had a beer in his hand. So he walked past me, and I'm like, where you going, baby? Oh, I'm going to the dressing room. I said, you can go, but that beer is gonna stay right here. And he looked at me kind of like, well, don't you know who I am? Yeah, and I gave him that look back. You go, the beer's got to stay here. And I got to know where you're going because we're going to take it. Fighters need to be protected. They need to have a comfort level that somebody in there
Cares about.
cares. And not only the fact that they're in the dressing room, but cares that their equipment stays in the dressing room, that their gloves are on, that they got to go out when they have to go, and that they can walk around very freely because they're already superstitious. They're already on point because they feel that somebody from another camp's going to be in the dressing room.
Now, I'll never forget, and I think you took shit for this. I forgot the fighter's name. He came out in a pair of underwear.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm glad you guys, somebody needed to get shit for that.
Yeah. What happened was he had a pair of shorts on that had something on it, and all I saw was 2 X's. Now, I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what it was in sponsorship. I know X was not good.
Right.
So I told him he had to take them off. Well, he didn't take them off and replace them. He just took them off and left them off. And out of the dressing room. And I was like, well, what do I do now? I know I told him they had to go. Yeah.
Can you give me any anecdote, anything is there one thing that sticks out in your mind that you say, man, only in the UFC or only in MMA?
One thing I remember was when Ronda Rousey first came on board. We were at the point where we were just making new gloves for the UFC. We were making new gloves for the smaller size. We didn't have a women's glove at the time, but we had Ronda Rousey. And when she got in, I decided, I said, you know what? I haven't checked her gloves yet. So I went and got a pair of small gloves. Then I took the gloves to Ronda's room. Ronda put the gloves on and went like that. I was like, oh, yes. Here it was, 2 days away from the fight, and I didn't want her to see the panic. I took the gloves downtown, had a shoe repairman stitch up the side of the gloves, of the fingers, so that she would get her finger in the hole. And that's what I had. But luckily, they called the company and had a set made that was delivered to me like that.
Nice. Well, we're talking about cutting weight, but we're in Philadelphia, the home of the Philly cheesesteak. I have a feeling that you know where to take MMA Noise to get a good cheesesteak.
I know where to take the noise, I know where to make the noise, I know where to break the noise, and I'll take you to where it's the best cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Yo, I'm Burt Watson, and you're watching MMA Noise on Louder Noise, baby. We rollin'!